Hi, I'm Marty Cohn, and this is BCTV's Meet the Candidates 2020, sponsored in part by Brattleboro Savings and Loan. This series affords you an opportunity to hear from the folks running for elected office. Today, our guest is Representative Mollie Burke, the Democratic Party and Progressive Party candidate for State Representative for Windham 2-2. Welcome, Representative Burke.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
All right, so let's delve right in. Why are you seeking re-election into this office?
Well, as you may know, this is my 7th election. I've been in the legislature for 12 years, so I like the work very much. And when I first started to run in 2008, I had been really concerned about climate change for a very long time. And I saw this as an opportunity to maybe affect some change or some, amelioration. And so after I was elected, I requested service on the Transportation Committee because transportation accounts for 45% of Vermont's greenhouse gases. And it's a very hard thing to cut emissions from transportation, as I found out in 12 years. And also, the other reason I wanted to run is I'm really passionate about diversifying our transportation system and now electrifying it in general. I mean, it creates a much better atmosphere. If we've had a society based on just motor vehicles. Roads are built for cars or have been in the past. And we need to promote other forms. Public transit, there's some exciting things happening in public transit now. Bicycle, pedestrians, people need to get out of their cars and exercise more, walk more. There's I don't know if you're aware of the sort of electric bike movement in Brattleboro, which is pretty exciting. I have one myself and it's really easy to zip around town with a power assist. So that's another reason that I just, I think for our sort of general environmental reasons and also for sort of societal reasons and health reasons. So that's, really what impelled me. I had been involved in town meeting. I was first elected as a Brattleboro town meeting member in 1990. I have a background in political science as well as in the arts. So I wanted a way to be involved in town politics. I didn't have the time with a family to be, a young family at the time, to be involved in select board or any of those offices, but I really enjoyed being a town meeting representative. And that sort of, gave me a little bit of an appetite for what I might find in the legislature, so.
All right, well, so a question that I ask everyone who's been on this show, I'm gonna ask you as well, in terms of what sets you apart from the other candidates seeking this office.
Well, as we just discussed, I do not have an opponent. So there, that's, I can't say what sets me apart, but I do want to emphasize my deep roots in the town of Brattleboro and my, deep knowledge of the community. I've lived here for many, many years, raised my family here. When you have kids in the schools, you get to, connected to the community in certain ways. I taught ice skating here for many years, got to know so many families from a lot of different types of families. People always wanted, skating was sort of a big leveler. People from different economic levels wanted their kids to learn how to skate. So that was a really valuable experience. So I have that I feel a very deep roots and knowledge of the community. And also, I think my 12 years experience in the legislature, that developing relationships, a lot of times people run for office and say, I'm going to go to Montpelier and I'm going to do this. Well, it's not it's in combination with other people. You need other people, you need to develop those relationships. And then also relationships with the agencies that you work with. I've been on the Transportation Committee for 12 years, worked very closely with the Agency of Transportation, knowing those people and knowing whom to write if there's a problem or an issue. So I guess I feel that if I were running against someone, I would emphasize those two things.
All righty. So let me ask you this. If you're reelected, what would be your top two priorities? You mentioned when you started 12 years ago, global warming, transportation. What would be your two priorities if you're reelected this time?
Well, unfortunately, that's still the issue. I mean, during the time that I've been in the legislature, our emissions have actually gone up, even though there've been a lot of great comprehensive energy plan, we've laid out goals, et cetera. But I think we're at a really exciting moment right now. So I guess what I'm saying is, yes, first priority, working to cut emissions from transportation. And I'm in a position, if elected, I would, definitely request being on the Transportation Committee again. I'm sure that that request would be honored. And because of the passage of the Global Warming Solutions Act, really gives a framework. We have to do this now. Our goals are now going to be mandatory. And tomorrow, there's going to be a press release coming out. The chair of our committee, Representative Kurt McCormick of Burlington, has developed a sort of climate section proposal for the transportation bill. Usually the Agency of Transportation, meaning the administration, comes to the committee and says, well, here's our proposal for this year. Here's how we want to spend the money. And then we sort of work on that and go, well, no, yes, we like this idea, we don't like that. But here's actually proposing upfront measures. And a lot of it is, and this press release is going to come out tomorrow. And it really lays a sort of a plan for how we might do this. And we need to, basically big support for electric vehicles and high mileage vehicles that get good gas mileage. And we have some programs for people who are low income people through the Community Action Agency, Capstone, and then also their incentives. We started a vehicle incentive program in the state. It's very modest. Last year I think it was 2 million. This year it's 1 million. We managed to sort of squeeze that in despite the administration's deciding, we can't afford it this year. Mandating charging stations in businesses with employees over a certain amount. What are the other things? Electrifying, no new transportation, no new buses without buying electric buses. A lot of things that are going to come out in this press release tomorrow that sort of lay a framework. So I feel like I'm really excited going into this session because we have the Global Warming Solutions Act, we have this plan, and I am really, really committed to making this happen. There's also this other sort of thing that's in the background right now called the Transportation Climate Initiative. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's like a consortium of northeastern states that have been having conversations about how to sort of create a cap and invest program for transportation, which could bring a lot of money into the state. And it was sort of hanging out there. The governor was going to be deciding whether Vermont was going to join. There were all these talks, and then COVID hit. So I'm going to be watching that very carefully. And the legislature definitely has a role. And the legislature could actually override the governor. Well, if we could override a veto and say, if he says he doesn't want to join, legislature could decide to join. And then, of course, there could be a veto issue, which we've just seen with the Global Warming Solutions Act. But anyway, so that's another one that's sort of in the background. And it's making me feel really positive about this moment. And then my other priority, I've been co-chair of the Women's Caucus, and one of our priorities has been women in corrections. So we have, majority of women who are incarcerated are nonviolent offenders. And they're there because of poverty, because of drugs, because of writing a bad check that was over the felony limit. All these reasons that if they were in a different situation, we've been really trying to think about how do we get these women out of an incarcerated situation and into like supportive housing with counseling, financial counseling, and having their children there. Just the downstream effects of having, and most of the women there have children, having women incarcerated with children, the effect on the children is huge, really, really huge. I mean, with any parent, but so that's another priority that, and I really enjoy my work with the Women's Caucus. We've also done some work with the sexual harassment issue in the Guard, and just also about how women were the most affected, have been most affected by COVID, and because of being more women on the front lines, frontline workers, things like that, most affected financially and health-wise. So those are my two priorities. Although, there are many others.
well, let me ask you about two other issues. If you're reelected, what would you do to ensure that more Vermont families with young children can find and afford childcare?
That is such an important issue. And I mean, it's not that my two priorities, as I said, this has been another really something that I've paid a lot of attention to. When you hear people say, well, we had to decide whether to buy a house or to afford childcare, that's crazy. I mean, it has an economic impact. And I have had access to a study from Quebec that was done in 2015 about the positive economic impact of their investment in childcare. They have subsidized childcare for everybody. And I think if we could do that, it would be a huge investment, but I think it would bring young couples to Vermont. It would yield in Quebec, it has meant that many more women were able to enter the workforce, which had a positive effect on GDP. For every dollar invested, they got $1.20 back. So many things. It's all about investment, and we've seen with COVID how the childcare issue has been exposed, as so many others have been. And so I would say, somebody might say it's pie in the sky. If we could do universal childcare for everybody in Quebec, I heard from a young woman who had children there. She was paying $20 a day per child. I mean, and this is a middle class family. So that allows, what does that allow? That allows people to spend money on other things. That allows people to buy houses. That allows people to, purchase things that also help the economy. So I think there's so many things, we'd sort of say, well, we can't do that because we don't have enough money. But then if you don't invest, then you don't get the return, sort of basic return on investment. So, so that would be my large, big picture thing. I know that we have done a lot this year in terms of raising the, aligning our child care financial assistance program with federal poverty guidelines, sort of upping that, providing more money for child care and I think over $100 or something $134 per student additionally this budget season. So there has been a recognition, little by little of that. But how do we get to, really a big investment?
All right. Well, now let me ask you about the other end of the age spectrum. Recent reports indicate that seniors in Vermont face one of the highest rates of financial insecurity in the nation. How do you think we can make life for seniors more affordable?
Well, two of the big costs are transportation and housing. And transportation, AARP had a conference, I don't know, maybe 2012 or something, called Transporting the Public, and about how people, seniors, a lot of times maybe hold on to a car to drive a couple miles. Maybe they're sort of restricting their driving at night or whatever, but they're still paying for a car. It costs about AAA has estimated it costs about $8,000 a year to own a car. So if we had better public transit for seniors, that would be one thing. And in general, and there's some actually a pilot project that's starting in Montpelier in January. It's called a demand response pilot. And instead of running 3 fixed routes around the 5.5 square mile radius, 5.5 square miles, they are having a way where you can call on the phone, or you could call from your landline if you don't, or your smartphone, so it allows for people with different technological capabilities. And you call and you might say, okay, I need a ride to go to the grocery store. So they come to your house and pick you up and take you to the grocery store. And then somebody, so there are these, you know, but maybe 3 buses driving around, but they're not on fixed routes, which makes it more accessible. So something like that, I think, could really, really help seniors to maybe really ditch their cars, or, you know, not have to use them. And then housing, you know, is a really big issue. And I think more subsidized housing. Again, investment. How do we invest? And, you know, there are a lot of seniors living, you know, very rural areas without access to transportation, without adequate housing, or you know, living in a big drafty house, hard to heat, and heating costs, things like that. And around that issue, and I think it gets into equity, and I also want to make sure that I don't forget to talk about the equity issue, because that should color everything. But that if we could help people insulate their homes, you know, weatherization is a big issue and helps people save a lot of dollars. So again, investment in, which also saves energy, cuts emissions. If people are not, you know, running their oil furnaces so much, they have a better weatherized house. So I think weatherization, housing, transportation. I'm very impressed with the work of Senior Solutions. They offer so many resources. Well, then there's food insecurity. So it's all about how we invest in these populations, really, and not forgetting them. And I just did remind me that I wanted to also talk about, you know, the equity issue and the racial issues that are, and that how in everything, you know, I'm realizing, trying to educate myself about my privilege and how I need to really expand my thinking and consider the implications of policies and my actions and everything in the lens, through the lens of racial equity. So just wanted to put that in the conversation.
Okay, well, thank you for putting that in. So I think that let's be optimistic about we're going to find a vaccine. We're going to get out of this COVID situation. What would be your vision for Vermont in a post-COVID world?
Like completely, you know, in the ideal world. Okay. In the ideal world, we'd have an electrified transportation system. You know, we'd have many more people walking and biking, and we'd have really vibrant downtowns. We'd have universal health care. We'd have universal childcare. We'd have investments in higher ed. We'd have good jobs. You know, paid family leave. So in a smaller scale, if we think about it, let's think about some of the things we've worked on. Paid family leave. Okay, that was vetoed. So, and that was it was so minimal. That program was so minimal. It wasn't even going to be funded by an employer. It was going to be funded by the workers. You know, you look at other countries and how they've solved some of these problems. You know, maybe they pay higher taxes, but it's then what you get, the benefit is so much greater. We had a field trip to Quebec a number of years ago, and to look at, you know, different sort of their economic issues and their energy issues. And this one woman, this really struck me. We were talking and it was sort of a question and answer. And somebody said, well, don't you pay high taxes here? And she said, yeah, we do. But we have, you know, basically free healthcare, subsidized childcare, higher ed is paid for, more or less, all these things. And she said, we pay. She said, but you pay too. You just pay differently. And that, you know, so if you think about what people pay for health insurance, for example, and copays and deductibles and all of those things, you know, I mean, it's complicated. And we did try in Vermont to sort of getting off on a healthcare track. But anyway, I just want to, you know, that would be my big vision. But of course, you can't just sort of, you have to go step by step. So I think if we can think about, I think it's really been clear how paid family leave in COVID has the impact of that. And I forgot to mention broadband. Broadband is essential for our energy, cutting down on energy, and also for, for commuting, and also for, access. I mean, kids who are not able to get on the internet because they live in a place where there's no broadband, the effect of that is going to last for a number of years. So, that's, and I think that those are recognized. I think everybody now recognizes broadband is a big issue. Paid family leave is a big issue. Let's start there. And childcare.
Okay, well, so last question for today for me is, what do you want voters to know about you, especially after 12 years? What would you like them to know about you?
Well, I'm the oldest of 11 children, and I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and on the Niagara River in Canada, and I have a background not only in political science. I studied at the London School of Economics, but also then I got a Master of Fine Arts from Goddard College. So I'm sort of have those two aspects to myself as an artist and art teacher, and working in the field of politics. And I also am founder, as you know, and executive director of an organization called Art in the Neighborhood, and we provide tuition-free art classes to children in low-income housing communities in Brattleboro. We work in Westgate, Ledgewood Heights, and Moore Court. And I was inspired to found this program, first of all, by the federal art project of the New Deal. When I think about, what Franklin Roosevelt did in terms of job creation, one of the things was jobs for artists. And not only that, but they were sort of socially useful. They created art, and a lot of artists got their start in those programs and eventually went on to become really well-known and successful artists. But working in community centers, teaching kids art, which can also be so beneficial for so many reasons. So I was inspired by that, and inspired by the fact that I was running an art program, summer art program, and gradually there were more and more art programs, and I realized we were all competing for the same middle-class kids, and that I wanted to offer those opportunities to kids who did not have access. So that's something that's really near and dear to my heart, and is continuing through COVID by, we're doing drop-offs at communities of art supplies and projects. I have a great staff. So that, and I also taught, I told you, I mentioned I taught ice skating, so I have that figure skating in my background. And I guess I also just want to say that I really love being a representative, and one of the best parts of my job is if I can help somebody, improve their life in some way. A lot of it this past few months, 6 months, has been helping people with unemployment, which has been a huge, huge issue. But other ways too, putting people in touch with people in state government who might be able to help. And you can't always help, and you can't always do it. And not everybody's going to be, happy with maybe how I vote or whatever. But I do enjoy and love representing District 2 in Brattleboro.
All right. Well, Representative Mollie Burke, the Democratic Party and Progressive Party candidate for state representative for Windham 2. Thanks for being on the show.
Oh, and I just want to remind everybody, census and voting, two really important things.
Well,
make sure if you've not been counted by the census, you can go online, figure out how to, I don't have all the information at my fingertips right now, but that is really important for federal funding that we get and many other reasons. And vote. Everybody should have gotten their ballot by now. Get your vote in early. You can take it down to the back of the municipal center and put it in a box, a big post office box that says vote. You can put it in the mail, or you can bring it to the polls on election day. And if you happen to get to the polls and you forget your ballot, it's still okay. As long as you're not checked off, you can do another one. So and you can register to vote on election day. In Vermont, contrary to what a lot of other states do to try to deny people the vote, we really actually try to make it as easy as possible for people to vote. So we want a great big turnout.
Okay, well, you must have read my script, because what I'm going to say is The general election is is Tuesday, November 3rd. You can vote early in person, you could vote absentee by mail, or vote absentee hand delivered on election day. Whichever way works for you, please vote. Thanks for watching Meet the Candidates 2020, sponsored in part by Brattleboro Savings and Loan. I'm Marty Cohn. Stay healthy.